Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hello listeners, thanks for tuning in with me, Megan O'Hara Sullivan, on Big Little Small Talk. Today we have a very special guest. His name is John Elliott. Welcome to Big Little Small Talk, John.
Thank you.
John, I like to do a little bit of research for the people that are coming on, and this is what I found about you, and you can testify to its testify to its veracity. Australian businessman and state and federal president of the Liberal Party. He has been president of the Carlton Football Club. He frequently provokes controversy due to his political affiliations, his brushes with the law, and his abrasive personal style.
Not me.
Not you, John Elliott.
Me.
I wondered about the...
I've got a big nose, but I haven't got an attitude like John Elliott.
Were you then, because your passion, of course, is photography, were you then named after Elliott Erwitt, who was a French-American photographer?
No, but I am a big fan.
Are you?
It's interesting with the other John Elliott. When he was at the peak of his powers, I loved newsagents. I had friends that were newsagents. And remember when they put the headlines out the front of the newsagent? One of the newsagents used to collect them. I've still got them. There's about 12 of them. Elliott's plan to power. John Elliott slams Bob Hawke.
Right.
When I call someone, they normally take my call. They think it's the other guy.
Oh, they do. That might be the secret to success. John, you have got a big story, and I don't know whether our 50 minutes is going to allow it, but what I want to know about you, because I've known about your work and the things that you've done for quite a long time, but you're an everywhere man. Like, you're here, you're there, but I don't know really where you come from. And can you tell me about I want to know A, about your family of origin, and B, about your family of creation. So tell me about your family of origin. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Blackall. Typical loudmouth, horrible country kid. I knew I was smart, but I never really paid attention at school. I lived there till I was 16. But in grade 8, I had a school teacher, a fellow called Robin Budge, that got me really interested in books. We made a scrapbook in his class, and that's something I do to this day. So if Robin Budge hadn't been my teacher in grade 8, I may have been a photographer, but I certainly wouldn't have made books. I hadn't seen Robin Budge for maybe 50 years. About 10 years ago, I tracked him down. He was a bit nervous, actually. I said, I need your address. And he's thinking, oh, why? And I didn't tell him, but I think I'd done maybe 11 or 12 books at that stage, and I put them in a carton, wrote a nice little note and sent them to him and said thank you, because I wouldn't have done without.
So he was that one teacher that changed your life,
Robin
Budge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Did he think that you were going to come and firebomb his house or something? Or?
I don't think. He probably remembered the horrible me. I don't know. But,
so you said that. You said you were a horrible person.
Not horrible, but I was...
What were you, a ratbag?
Well, I just never paid attention in class and that.
What were Mum and Dad doing in Blackall?
My dad started life, I remember, when he was a shearer's cook. Then he became a butcher. But the Elliott family are a long line of rugby league people. So his mother before him in the 40s had been the president of the Blackall Rugby League, which I'm guessing was probably unheard of in those days. But Dad became president of the Rugby League in Blackall, became the president of Central Western Rugby League. I was a really good sports person. Even if I didn't want to play rugby league, I had to play rugby league. So yeah, we had 3 brothers. I remember in the middle of winter in Blackall, we'd all be out of bed early and up at the footy field, sort of putting the flags up for the game that day. And so yeah, rugby league, the sports side was a big part of our lives.
So the brothers, where did you fit in with the brothers?
Had 2 older brothers.
You're 3, number 3.
And a younger brother.
Mm-hmm. Right. Which one of the brothers did you get on best with?
Oh, I think I sort of got on with all of them. My older brother was a printer. He worked at the Barcoo Independent. And there was something in me that was inquisitive about that whole book and printing and photography, and I have really vivid memories of watching him on a linotype machine setting the type in hot metal type it up, and it would make this line of type, and it bolted all together, and that's how the Baku Independent was printed.
Is the Baku Independent still going?
Sort of,
Is it?
sort of. But it's interesting, that way of making newspapers has long been out of favour. But I've got a book almost finished on Dorrigo, and the Don Dorrigo Gazette. It was printed exactly the same way up until a year ago. So I could go back in Dorrigo when I was down there and watch, and I could smell the hot lead. I think you get lead poisoning from, probably wasn't all that safe, but yeah. So that whole process interested me from day one.
Right. And just going back to family life, so, you know, were you a close family where you were, apart from rugby league, what else kept the Elliott's boys busy?
Yeah, I had a pretty idyllic childhood, really. And I don't think my parents were particularly well off. But things keep popping up. A few years ago, I was at my younger brother's place one day, and he still had the top 40 charts from when we were kids. Music was really important to us. I had no music in me. I couldn't clap my hands, but I loved listening. And Mick had the 4LG, the radio station in Longridge, had their top 40 chart. And there was a tick next to every one of them. My parents had an account at the local electrical store. So I'd forgotten about that. We could just go and get the Beatles' latest record, or the Love and Spoonful or whatever. So we had a really good record collection, and that may have been unusual in those days.
Wow, I think it's unusual that your parents would let you go and book up a couple of records.
And we also had an account at the Blackwell Pharmacy, a fellow called Earl Grove, who he sort of fed my interest in photography, taught me how to process films. And
so let's talk about that. You've probably been asked a million times, when did you get your first camera? When did you take your first photo? What was it of?
I have really distinct memories, and I knew we had a box camera. Mum would pull it out when it was one of our birthday parties, or we'd all be together, or when we got a new dog or whatever. By the time I was 11, I was the one that sort of did that. At the same time, my neighbour over the road, Bobby Sutton, he would give me a lift to school. He worked at the garage near the school. And I'd go over early because he used to get Life magazine. So I was exposed to the best photographers in the world when I was 11, and I paid attention. The local library used to get National Geographic, and I used to haunt. So I've been feeding all those images in from a lot. I knew when I was 11 that I'd be a photographer.
Jerry, so how did you go? You said you stayed in Blackall until you were 16. What happened then? How about getting money?
You could only go to school in Blackall till grade 10. Most kids in Blackall went to either Rocky Grammar or St Brendan's College at Yeppoon. We weren't Catholics, but I went to St Brendan's because it was a better rugby league school. And, you know, I'd sort of had in the back of my head, I couldn't wait to get out of town. But I was a big sook when I went to boarding school. I really missed home and missed my parents, and it only lasted 1 year. And I came home and refused to go back to grade 12. And Dad came home one day and said, "Congratulations, you've got a job at the National Bank." I thought, oh, that was never in my plans. I'd applied for jobs as photographers. I remember distinctly applying for a job. Queensland Railway had 14 photographers, but I missed getting that. Dad said, "Congratulations, working for the National Bank." So I went and worked at the bank in Blackall. But then they sent me, like a few months later, they sent me off to bank school in Brisbane, which was a bit of a big adventure, because I've been to Brisbane a couple of times, but only for a day here and there. Went back to Blackall for a little bit, and then they said, "You're transferred to Mount Isa." And I must have been 17, I reckon. And Mount Isa was a cowboy town. It really was. Like, I'd never really been out, or I'd never really been drinking. And so here I'm 17 in Mount Isa. It was crazy. It was amazing. I think there were 8,000 single men lived in Mount Isa at that time. They all worked in the mines, and they were from all over the world, and there were gambling places, and you could get pizzas. I'd never seen pizza before. You'd get pizzas, and
Isn't Isn't that interesting? And when you said cowboy, do you mean literally cowboys? So people coming in off the stations as well
No,
as lawlessness?
people
Yeah.
shooting each other in the streets.
What year are we talking here?
68,
Right.
69.
Yeah.
And there was live music in 3 or 4 pubs every night of the week. And like we weren't old enough to be in the bar, but we're there every night.
And who were you living with? Were they
Oh,
in bank quarters or
we had
something?
bank quarters. They're
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah, right.
So the bank was in West Street, and the back of the bank was on the banks of the Leichhardt River. They were bank quarters, but they looked like horse stables. But there was a real social scene. All the banks had their own quarters, and we all hung together. And
All men, no women.
yeah, no, there were some women.
Couple women.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
not many,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's interesting. In our social circle, there was I remember his name, Eric Lofting. He was a technician at the radio station and at the commercial radio station. And I suppose it's that long ago I can tell you the story.
Please do. It sounds like it's going to be interesting.
We're at the pub one night and he said, you know, the Wheel of Fortune competition, I think it's worth $960 tomorrow. He said, I know when it's going to happen. When you hear the Wheel of Fortune spin, you call the radio station. So I won it.
Oh.
And I thought, if it's that easy, I've got to be in radio. But all I still had in the back of my head, I was going to be a photographer. But I got distracted, won that competition. Eric got me a job as a DJ at the next town in Longridge, and I ended up going back to Mount Isa.
Just tell me about the transition into radio. You've got this, you won the money.
Yeah.
Underhandedly, I'm taking it with
Had
a bit of graft.
No experience in radio.
Right. So you go in, you decide you're going to give up the bank job?
Well, Eric got me a job. I used to go in every night and he'd bodgy up an air check, a sound check of me being a DJ. I'd turn up at the 4LG in Longridge and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I got good at it.
Right. And you loved that world then, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
What did your father say when you said, I'm throwing in the NAB job?
Well, I
think
think
you have to write to him and tell him that you were going to...
They were sort of impressed in the end. Because it was a bit of a big deal.
Right, yeah.
Come from Blackwell, you're a DJ on the radio station.
Yeah.
It was interesting later on, and I played rugby league, both Blackwell and Longridge, but I ended up doing a program called League Talk on 4LG at midday on a Sunday. So I would often be in conflict with my father, who is the president of Central Western League. And
right, having different opinions on how things should
I'd be having
be running.
To argue with him about what was happening in the rugby league.
Right, interesting. But he was not a person who kind of held on to grudges or I got you this job. He's just, go and make your way, son. Now, you said before we came on air that you were involved in local government in Mount Isa, is that right?
Well, I went to work at 4LG in Longridge. I went back to 4LM in Mount Isa. And by that time, I was pretty good at it. I did the breakfast show. But then I got invited to run for council. You had to be 21 to vote. I actually the guy that invited me to run for council was a very young, aspiring Labor guy called Tony McGrady. So, one of the sitting councillors ran the radio station. So when I ran for council, I had to leave. And I got a job at the TV station reading the news. And so I went in it for a laugh, but I got elected, which was...
Did get elected?
Yeah, yeah. We got 11 out of 14. The previous council had been unopposed forever. It was a mining town. They were the mines people. So it all changed. And
so how many terms did you do doing it?
I'd had enough.
Right.
I think might have got $1,600 a year.
Yeah.
And it was difficult because it was hard work.
Yeah. So you'd had to give up your job to do it. So what were you surviving on then, John?
Well, Tony McGrady and 2 of the other councillors all worked as cab drivers. So Tony said, and I think I'd been earning maybe $300 a week. It was 1972 as a radio or television person. My first week as a cab driver in Mount Isa in 1972, I earned $1,000.
Wow. Yeah.
I think, as I said, there were 8,000 single men living there. None of them had cars. They lived in barracks on the mine side. They were all European, so they'd tip.
Right.
My first wife and I remember sitting on the bed on a Sunday night, counting the money. We thought we'd won on the casket.
Well, now we're getting ahead of ourselves. So I'll just remind the listeners that they're on 102.7 FM. You're listening to Big Little Small Talk. My name's Megan O'Hara Sullivan, and we are interviewing John Elliott, who is not the Australian businessman, but a photographer of renown. Now, you're 21, you're reading the news, you're driving the cab, counting the money. So we find a wife somewhere along the line there, do we?
Yep.
Tell me about that.
I actually found a wife back in Longridge.
Okay.
Leanne, she was the best looking girl in town, and it wasn't unusual to get married young then. We had a son a little bit later, and we shifted back to Mount Isa.
And was Leanne working, or?
Yeah, she worked at the hospital.
Yeah, yeah. So you had a little boy.
Oh, I'd never heard about kindergartens, but there was a proper kindergarten. It was amazing. Mount Isa was pretty sophisticated and sort of European. Like, it was this massive kindergarten. I didn't know anything about kindergartens in Longridge.
Why were a lot of the workers European?
In those days, I think they were the only people who would go and work that hard. There were Australians there as well, but there were a lot. I think there must have been some incentive for foreign workers to come and work there.
So the radio career must have taken off at some stage, because you ended up producing John Law's show at some stage in your illustrious career.
I'm not quite sure how all that happened, but I became very good at the radio industry. Before I produced John Law's, I worked at every radio station in Toowoomba. Everyone, I think. I don't think I ever had a job here, but I hung around here as well. But I ended up there was a guy that managed 4GR here called David Greenwood, who I'd come into contact with before, and I was promotions manager at 4GR. In the meantime, Tula, who I ended up marrying, she went to Brisbane to be a model. David Greenwood shifted to 4BK in Brisbane. So I just spent a lot of time there. I'd just go in and see David at 4BK. And one day I said, got to find a job because I'm coming to live here. And so I became creative director at the radio station. No one knew what I did, but I made
them. It's a good job to have, isn't it?
I made them successful. David was very adventurous. He'd employed a guy called Wayne Roberts to do the breakfast show.
Wayne P.
He was a superstar.
Yeah.
So we did some incredible. We were owned by Queensland newspapers, who are a very conservative organisation. I remember once they asked we did some television commercials through an ad agency, Ogilvy and Mather, and it was an animated commercial, and the catering bill was $16,000 on the production.
So an animated production ad for television, was it?
Yes.
Yes.
Promoting the radio station.
Oh, right. I'm with you, yeah.
We had an animated character called BK Bear.
Right. And all this time, are you taking photographs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Working in radio had allowed me, so I knew that if we were doing exciting things, we had to excite the advertising agencies. So every time, even when I was working at stations in Toowoomba, we would photograph everything we did and use those photographs to spread the word about the great stuff we're doing. And we did a really good job on that.
You were social media before there was social media?
Sort of. And at 4BK, we were the #1 young person station. So I loved photographing music, and it opened lots of doors. I was just reminiscing, there's a blonde lady in Fleetwood Mac, her name was...
Stevie Nicks?
Not Stevie, the other, Christine McPhee.
Yeah.
She died about a year ago, and I'd forgotten about it. The record company phoned me one night and said, Fleetwood Mac is starting a tour in Brisbane next week, but she's in town a week early, and Blondie's playing tonight and she wants to go. Would you mind? So Tula and I go to the Park Royal, pick her up, go to I think it was Her Majesty's Theatre in the city to see Blondie play. Just standing inside of the stage and Blondie's playing.
Were you pinching yourself all this time?
No, that was just the good old days. It was pretty normal.
So we are jumping ahead. So last mention of your family of creation, we were still married to Leanne and we had a son, and now we're married to Tula. So how does that all happen?
I think Leanne grew up and
wanted a different life.
She wanted a stable life, and
that wasn't you.
Yeah. I was 24, but I was very young. But we're still good friends.
And how did you meet Tula?
sharing accommodation with another guy. I won't mention his name. And somehow, I think I'd organised a date with this other girl. And I said, I've got a flatmate, you'll have to bring someone else as well. So Toowoomba was the other one. It wasn't my date, but from that night on, no, I was about 3 hours late getting home. It wasn't good. Wasn't a good start.
So you said before that Toowoomba had a Greek family. Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm sure there'd be a lot of listeners here who would know Toolooba's family.
Toolooba's surname was Lavonis. Her father was George Lavonis. He had the Sundowner Cafe and Camelot Restaurant and George's, Snacks Alive. There's a really, not particularly big, but there's a very strong Greek community in Toowoomba, and Kay Lavonis at Snippets in the old days. Is a really well-known hairdresser, still is. They're first cousins. All our kids grew up in the Greek church. They all learned Greek dancing. It's really funny because Kay's husband is Afro-American, and some of our Greek kids are blonde hair and blue-eyed. And when they were all growing up at school, they would often go and perform Greek dancing at a school fete. And I used to love just wandering around, and you could see people thinking, a couple of those kids look like Will Smith. And they're dressed up like Greeks. And hang on, this kid's got blonde hair.
It's a bit hard to work it out.
But the boys particularly loved it. They were such show-offs with their Greek dancing.
Right. So you and Toowoomba then had three kids. 3 children together.
Yeah,
right. And you were living in Brisbane because of the modelling career?
Yeah, in the early days. But then we shifted back. We've sort of always had lived here and had a base here. We've spent a lot of time in Brisbane as well.
Yeah. So the boy from Blackall and the Greek family, was that a culture shock for you?
Not really. And back in those days, I think a lot of Greek families expected their daughters to marry Greek people. They sort of, when they realised I wasn't going away, I was sort of accepted and welcomed into the family, which, you know, to this day, Julie and I have been divorced for a long time, but I remember I told her mother, she said, you don't divorce the family.
Was that a good thing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We'll still be friendly to you.
We have.
Or you're not getting rid of us.
I am so fortunate. Toowoomba's probably had times where she could have told the kids that I wasn't a good father. I don't think she ever did. So we're very lucky that we're all still pretty stuck together.
Were you photographing the kids a lot when they were younger?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I've got millions of pictures. And it's interesting because George, he was a restaurateur, but the most creative guy. He always took videos and photographs. There's millions of pictures of the broader Greek family as well.
So you said before, John, about making these scrapbooks. What I want to know about you is, where is all your stuff? Like, you must have a lot of stuff.
Had 2 shipping containers till a week ago. I've got 3 now. Because I've shifted around a bit as well.
Yes.
But I think Melco should make me an honorary life member. I've had stuff in storage, but it's not just locked up and left there, because I work on lots of other books and projects and that. So I'm a pretty regular visitor to one of those storage facilities in Toowoomba.
So have you got it all kind of catalogued as to what's
Every
in
project
there?
I do, it gets a little better. I manage. I've got a pressing deadline at the moment. State Library they're buying about 800 images off me. I've found about 700 of them. I've got to find another 100 before Christmas.
So what do you mean? Like they've said, can you produce these?
Well, I've done 10 of the books I've done are on regional parts of Queensland, and they want a digital file of every image in those 10 books.
And who commissions those books?
I
think you decide to do it and then sell it?
I think it's because of my background in what I did in radio. I've become very skilled at knowing, like Mount Isa, when they had their 90th anniversary, I knew that they needed a book. So they commissioned. I've done books with major publishers, but a lot of them I've had an idea, found someone that would pay for it and did it that way.
Tell me about the National Portrait Gallery and them commissioning you. Was that just kind of an excuse for you to go and photograph your heroes? You know?
No,
how does something like that come
I'd hooked
about?
up with Slim Dusty, So I did a lot of work with Slim over the years. And in 93, I can't remember the name, there was a new magazine in Australia, and they paid for me to go and photograph Slim Dusty and Edna Everage in the Kimberleys. They were doing a concert together. I did the job for them, but I was backstage with Slim and Edna, and the concert's running late, and they were friends and they were pretty comfortable together. So I took about 6 frames of them just sort of arm in arm backstage. Years later, I read that the federal government are going to build a national portrait gallery in Canberra. Hadn't seen those pictures in years, didn't even know where they were. And they mentioned the guy's name, Andrew Sayers, was going to be the director of it. So I called him up. And he took the call and I said, got these pictures of Slim Dusty and Edna Everage, they're great in your collection. He said, be interested in having a look. So I eventually found them and sent them to him. And when they opened the gallery, I think it was in the late 90s, they've got every famous painting, every famous artwork in Australia in their collection. But the invite to the opening of the original portrait gallery was my picture of Slim and Edna.
And what do you think that was? It was sort of the quintessential Aussie, Aussie
it
image,
captures that whole thing, you know. There's not many countries in the world where a proper cowboy singer would hook up with an unattractive, cross-dressing housewife superstar.
So when you were photographing Dame Edna, was Barry Humphries in that role the whole time? He didn't come out?
Sort of.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, he's an incredibly intelligent man.
And he's a big bloke. Like, he's not this shrinking. Well, backstage, over in the Kimberleys, winter, it's a bit of a cool night. No portal or anything backstage. There's a Hessian screen around the backstage area. And Barry needed to have a pee, so he's got up and hitched up the
the sequin dress.
I'm thinking that is the shot.
That's a good shot.
But I didn't take it. I thought he'll track me down.
Yeah, that's right. You'll have to use some decorum. So did you then do more portraits for the National Gallery?
Yeah,
they commissioned you, did they?
They called me.
Yeah.
I had my own show there. So very fortunate that they paid me to do an exhibition called 1,000 Mile Stare, to look in people's eyes in the bush. And they deal in celebrities, so mostly they want famous people. But
did they ask you for certain people, or did you get the vibe?
No, they knew. They knew who I had. They knew that I photographed in regional parts of Australia, and they also knew that I photographed people like Slim Dusty and Crow Hart and
Chad Morgan,
Jimmy
Little.
But I convinced them that other people had worthwhile stories as well. So the show, I think there were 83 portraits. It was a mix of famous and people that were famous in my mind.
Yeah, well, I wanted to talk about that. So you don't necessarily want beautiful people, do you?
No.
You want people with character in their face.
I'm interested in interesting people, and I think everyone's got a story. It's the normally pretty bores me.
Yeah.
Normally attractive bores me.
How does the photograph tell the story? Tell me about that. How do you capture their essence?
Yeah, I used to be interested in environmental portraiture. Like if I was in the old days, I was doing a picture of you, it would include the studio and the microphone, and that's, I've worked out as I've got older, and I've stuck at it. That's just stuff. It's not you. So the older I've got, the closer, and it's really about what's going on behind their eyes. It's got nothing to do with photography. It's what's going on behind. It's the essence. You've got to find what it is about that person.
Yeah, I want to talk some more about that. But
it's sort of therapy for me, you know.
I'll just remind people that you're on Big Little Small Talk. We're talking today with John Elliott, and he's a photographer. He's got an exhibition here called Almost a True Story, and it's at the Toowoomba Regional Art Gallery until
23rd of February.
23rd of February. So, John, you were saying about the essence of people. So, how do you look at a photograph and think, yep, I've got it, I've got their essence? Tell me about that process.
It's about instantly getting the subject to find that trust. They've got to trust, and the more you do it, the better you get at it.
What builds the trust, and how do you know that moment when you know that you've got them?
I wish someone had given me a T-shirt and said, "Don't be a," because that's what it is. You know, just you've got to. The the photographer has to be fair dinkum if he wants the subject to be fair dinkum. So it's about being honest and being authentic and getting all that facade, and like you've got to get that out of the way.
Yeah. Are you, because it can be quite intimidating having a photographer there, their face is hidden by that big camera. Are you talking to your
All the
subject the
time.
whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I don't think I've ever taken a picture from across the road with a long lens. I'm not interested. If I can't talk to the subject, I'm not interested. So I like to be close.
So is it more interesting when people have lots of lines on their faces? Because you really seem
Sometimes.
to be very enraptured by the cowboy type image, isn't it? Or people in sort of authentic Australian.
Yeah, yeah. If I see someone now I think is interesting, if I don't ask them if I can take their picture, I kick myself for days. So
Right.
not many slip by anymore.
Are you just doing that on your phone nowadays? Like if you meet a
Mostly,
stranger, can
yeah.
you say, "Can I take your
Mostly,
photo?"
yeah.
Yeah.
And I haven't had knockback on the phone.
Really?
People are a
Yeah.
bit intimidated with big clunky cameras.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. So can I ask you, who are you chasing? You're taking my photograph now. Who are you chasing? Who would you love to photograph?
there's no one that I want to photograph that I haven't.
Really? Do you always photograph people you like? Having
Yeah,
just taken my photograph, I'll take that as a compliment.
absolutely. I'm not interested. I have no interest in photographing people I don't like.
How do you know whether you're going to like them or not?
I fall in love with everyone.
Oh, that's handy.
You know what I mean? But yeah, you just know.
Right.
I can spot bullshit 1,000 paces.
Yeah. But do you think that says more about you in that you can find something to like about
Yeah,
everyone?
that's my job, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
I find everyone has something about them that we'll photograph and help whoever's looking at the image to understand who they are and what they're about.
Tell me about taking photographs of Indigenous people. I know you work with a lot of Indigenous people and rock stars, Yothu Indy, and lots of people like that. How do they? Because it's particularly sensitive about capturing. Yeah, tell me what you do there.
I've photographed, I guess, in lots of subcultures. Back in the early 90s, there was only one tattoo magazine in Australia. I photographed a lot for them. And back then, it was pretty much a bikey sort of a thing, the tattoo. And it was interesting. I think the editor did it on purpose. I think he took great delight in sending me out to bikey tattoo shows. I look like an undercover cop. But, you go back time after time, they accept you, and you don't have to be condescending. You just got to be fair dinkum. So I got accepted into that. I did the rodeo scenes pretty much exactly, and then the country music scene. And over the years, I've had lots of contact. I actually worked at a Aboriginal radio station for a year as a consultant to hook them up with the country music industry. And I've actually been the token white fella in a couple of Aboriginal exhibitions. And I take that, I wear that with pride. I would never jeopardize. Like I try and do the right thing with the people I photograph. Even to this day, I don't photograph on the pro rodeo circuit anymore. But without fail, I could probably go to any rodeo in Australia and someone would say, well, he's all right. He's hung around for a long time.
Is that a conscious choice that you don't photograph on the pro rodeo?
Yeah.
For what reason?
There's a bit of bullshit now.
Not sort of on animal cruelty grounds.
No. It's in rodeo people's best interest not to harm animals, to be honest. I like music and I photograph a lot more music than rodeos now. If I get an opportunity, I'll go to a rodeo and catch up with old friends and that.
So you've just been out in Winton because they're having some sort of celebratory type thing, and you're doing a book for them as well.
150. It's their 150th year next year. I actually took a job. I hadn't had a full-time job since 1980.
That's pretty fair effort.
So I've done a lot of work in the Winton area because I love it. Blackall's flat and black soil. Winton has ridges and mountains and totally different world, very exotic. I've done lots of work up there. In 2014, I was up there and I knew the mayor, a guy called Butch Lenton. And I was up there doing a job for the council and he said, we're looking for a tourism officer. you should apply. And I said, oh, bugger off. Well, can't imagine me working. And I ended up applying. One of my kids who works in that field wrote the best job application, and I got the job. And my kid said, "Oh, you won't last long." I stayed there 5 years, so I loved it. I have the attention span of an ant. I was there for 5 years, and I never got bored once.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Have you always been able to survive on your art?
Yeah.
Have you ever been, particularly when you had a young family, was it ever a bit touch and go, or you'd just do something if you had to?
Well,
Take a job doing something?
a couple of things. I was very fortunate that I had Toowoomba was very understanding, and we managed to survive. The music industry back in the 90s, where I earned most of my money, like you wouldn't have anything for 6 months, then you'd get a couple of really big jobs, and it sort of worked out. Yeah, I definitely could have earned more money if I was a wedding photographer, but I would never risk. Photography was so important to me that I would never risk not liking taking pictures, so I never did anything I didn't want to do.
Are most of your pictures black and white or a variety?
There is a lot of colour as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about being the North American marketing person for Crocodile Dundee films.
That came out of my connections in radio. Yeah. How? Why? Yeah, it was fascinating. I went to work for this ad agency to do that. I got there on a Monday. On the Wednesday, I was on a flight to Los Angeles. Had no idea what I was doing. But it was what to come. I'd done some of it before I got there. It was genius. The ad agency came up with the idea to give away family trips. They called it Northern Australia. It was a joint thing by the Queensland Tourist and Travel Corp and the Northern Territory equivalent. So they marketed it as North America. And Qantas were involved, and they gave away family trips to Northern Australia to the best media partner I could find in each market in North America. So if you promote the movie, we'll give you, a husband and wife and 2 kids can.
Where were they going to? It wasn't like Mount Isa or somewhere, was it?
No, they'd come to the Barrier Reef, to Brisbane, then go to the Territory, yeah.
So this was the original Crocodile Dundee?
Yes, the
Did
first
you get
one.
to meet Paul Hogan and all of, Linda?
No, I think David Greenwood from the ad agency did, but I remember you'd fly back, and we were travelling everywhere first class, so you'd be up in the top of the jumbo, and I remember I had an inflatable, not kangaroo, an inflatable crocodile, a life-size one.
As you do.
But it was amazing. I went to, I think it was 20th Century Fox, I think. I used to stay at a hotel right near the studio. I went there that often, but the security guards, they Mr. Elliott, welcome.
That is incredible. So how long would that gig have been for?
That was about a year.
Right.
And after that, I was reading about this new movie. This is a couple of years later. Yahoo Serious. What was the movie called?
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I knew that they were going to launch in North America, so I approached the film company involved in that, and they thought it was I had no idea, and they thought it was a good idea, but Warner, the film company in America, decided against it. Then, like a month before the movie opened, I called me and said, we're in a bit of trouble. They have no idea what they're doing. So I got to work on some of that as well.
Right. John, are you sort of just that person who goes, oh, all this crazy stuff's happened to me in my life? Or do you say, no, I actually had to chase that and I had to work for that?
It's never seemed like work. I think I've got some sort of creative thing going on, and I know how to connect things up. So, yeah, and I do that in my photography. I do it in the books that I do.
But have you not had any sort of setbacks in your life?
Oh, yeah. But, if someone says no to me, a couple of things. It motivates me because I like saying, proved you wrong.
Nothing like vengeful thing.
I think in every yes, you've got to get the no's out of the way. So, yeah, people saying no to me, like
Just
water of a duck's
move
back.
on to
Yeah,
the next
yeah.
thing. Tell me what the Central Western Ringers Institute is. Is that a made-up stuff?
It's bullshit.
Okay,
I
that's
think one of I
that's not
think one of I think one of my mates made that.
Is that just kind of coming from Blackall or something?
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just yeah. Okay. What about your Churchill Fellowship? What did you do that on?
Well, a long time ago, I remember reading in National Geographic about this thing called the Missouri Photo Workshop. So the University of Missouri School of Journalism, and they've been doing this, I think, since maybe the 50s. They take a team of photographers every year to a different small community in Missouri and document life in that town. So I would have torn it out and think I'll cross my mind I'll do that one day, and I kept putting it off.
Shipping container.
And I can't remember, it was in about 2004. I applied. I think I missed out the first year.
Did you get your daughter to write that for you as well?
No, I did that one myself. So I missed out the first year and I applied again.
And what was your pitch going to be?
I wanted to go to the Missouri Photo Workshop.
Yeah.
I wanted to go to the Library of Congress. I was really strongly influenced by a bunch of photographers who worked for the FSA, the Farm Security Administration, in the Depression years. Those photographers changed how all of America thought about Middle America and the Dust Bowl. And so the Library of Congress had 600,000 of those images. I wanted to go there, and country music, documenting country music history. So I applied, and it's funny. If you get shortlisted, you've got to, I think they used to have the interviews at the Supreme Court. You go and present on the weekend, present you. I remember they offer you counselling if you're uncomfortable. And I'm thinking, maybe half a dozen people sitting listening to me. So I remember there was a person who was in charge. She kept asking me if I'd had anything to do with the Queensland Centre for Photography, like 5 times. And I remember saying I haven't, but I have just had my own show at the National Portrait Gallery. And there's no other Queensland photographer. So when I was leaving, the guy that was walking along, he said, I thought you were going all right there, but I think you blew it. But I got it.
Right.
So
because did she want you to have had something to do with it, do you think?
Yeah.
Right.
I think I said, people that have lots of contact with Queensland Centre for Photography have normally gone to Griffith Uni. They'll be a photographer for a year, and then they'll end up working.
Western Ringers. That's got to be for something.
But it was amazing going to that.
Well, I asked you about the Churchill Fellowship because that's my one big goal in life is to do it.
It's a really worthwhile thing.
Yeah, it's an incredible program.
As a past recipient, I can say that you should just keep applying. I'll give you some advice. You need a
subject.
You need a good idea. You need to be. I love their application is about 3 pages. You need to be able to clearly enunciate it, and you need to have some idea of how you will give back when you.
And that's what it is. What do you get? What knowledge are you going to bring back? And impart on Australia.
It is the most. I remember in the old days, Steve Weiss, who was a blacksmith in Toowoomba, who was part of the Weiss family. He went and studied blacksmithing, came back and built this incredible blacksmith shop. And like everyone, you don't have to be an academic. They'll do it for scientific research or police work or doing podcasts or whatever. It's a great thing.
It's because it's a really unique thing doing podcasts. But anyways, we're going to have to wrap it up, my friend. But I'm going to ask you the same 2 questions that I ask everyone. One is, who is your favourite royal? Have you photographed any royalty?
I actually hung out with
Prince Paul Hogan.
No, with Prince Philip.
Oh, well,
at the Commonwealth Games, I managed the big colour scoreboard, and he was genuinely interested. And they said, "Oh, in the morning, Prince, you better tidy up. Prince Philip wants to come and ask you some questions."
What is it? The scoreboard?
The big colour scoreboard at the Commonwealth Games. It was really brand new technology. Then it's pretty primitive now. So Prince Philip turned up the next day.
And so, did you get to photograph him?
I think I did get a couple of snapshots.
Right.
But can I tell you I thought long and hard about my favourite since you've asked me. And I've collaborated with this person over many projects. There's actually a shot that I did with her in the exhibition.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I've got the title right. Her Divine Holiness, Pope Alice.
Oh, tell me about Pope Alice.
So Pope Alice is, I guess, an alien pope, a gay icon. He does a lot of work with a visual artist and a performance artist called Luke Roberts. So yeah, he's this other alien pope person.
Right. Well, that's royalty, definitely.
It is.
And that's all part of the exhibition, which is called, sort of ironically or fittingly, Almost a True Story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because people think that photographs don't lie, and that is a lie.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question. Are you a dancing man? I know you like music, country music particularly. What's a song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
Well, I'm not a dancer. I can't even clap my hands in time. However, I was a DJ in the old days at Zach's International, right opposite the Toowoomba Regional Art Gallery. And if people are sitting down and not dancing, I had a go-to song. I had a couple, but the one that was guaranteed to work every time, Split Ends, I see red, I see red, I see red. Guarantee if you put that on the turntable, everyone, even the people behind the bar, would be dancing.
Well, that is beautiful. And particularly since this is probably our last interview before Christmas, the Split Ends, I see. Remember those wacky costumes that they had as well? They really broke Countdown down, put it on its knees.
They looked a little, but I love them. Yeah. They were crazy.
And they're good for dancing. John, I'm sure I can fill up another hour and another hour after that. But thank you for spending time with us this afternoon and telling us the John Elliott story. Much better and much kinder, I think, than the businessman, John Elliott.
Thank you, Megan. And I will check to make sure you have applied for your Churchill Fellowship.
Good. That's what I need. A little bit of flogging. That's great. Thank you. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.